My name is Charles, and this story begins when I was 6 years old. I was the youngest child in my family. I had an older sister who was 4 years older than me. My dad was a very patient and quiet man. I don't know when it started, but as long as I could remember, he had always been that way. My mom was an excellent nurse at the local town hospital. She did absolutely everything around the house. My sister and I were taught to help her from a very young age. As for why my dad never did anything and was always silent, my mom explained to us, "Your dad has severe complications from diabetes. He just needs time to recover." My mom taught us how to take care of him in a very systematic way. My favorite morning chore was helping my mom put baby powder on my dad to prevent bed sores from lying down too long. I asked my dad a lot of questions and told him all about my days at school. I knew he was listening because his eyes were always fixed on me. He just never answered or praised me, not even once. My parents' bedroom always had the air conditioning running freezing cold, day and night. It was so cold that my sister and I had to wear heavy winter jackets every time we went inside. I wondered why my dad never blinked, and my mom explained it was a complication of his illness. She also said he wanted it that way, so he could always look at my sister and me. Then, my mom started using a wheelchair to push my dad out to the dinner table every evening, but my dad never ate anything. His food was always left untouched, and my mom would divide it between my sister and me. Once, my sister asked my mom, "Why is Dad's skin so stiff and gray?" My mom gently explained that it was a side effect of his medication. My mom was very careful about taking care of my dad. She reminded my sister and me almost every day that we were not allowed in their bedroom without permission. We had to let him rest. Most importantly, we weren't allowed to touch him too much. My mom said that our hands and breath carried a lot of bacteria, which was bad for his health. Whenever the mail carrier rang the doorbell or neighbors knocked to check on us, my mom would immediately turn off the lights. She made my sister and me sit in total silence without making a sound. She would go out alone to talk to them. She explained that my dad was extremely sensitive. She said a sudden loud noise could cause a brain aneurysm, so my sister and I had to keep quiet even when we were playing. After a while, I started noticing a strange smell coming from my dad. It smelled like rotten fruit that I used to sneak into my room and forget about, mixed with a hint of air freshener. I called it Dad's smell. Honestly, it made my sister and me uncomfortable every time we went to see him. Because of that, we stopped asking my mom for permission to go into his room as much. Lately, my dad's illness seemed to be getting much worse. His appearance changed a lot. His hair fell out in clumps. I could even see a bare patch on his scalp. His fingers curled up tight and stiff, making it very hard for me to straighten them when I put powder on him. My mom started changing the way she dressed him. Even inside the house, she made him wear a thick beanie, large sunglasses that covered half his face, and a heavy wool scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. My mom said his frail body was too weak now and couldn't handle the cold air in the room anymore. Then, my sister started acting strange. She began watching my dad more closely during dinner. Sometimes, I saw her staring blankly at his curled fingers, and then she would look over at the scarf covering his neck. Once I asked her to watch my favorite movie with me, but she refused. She just held her iPad, searching for something online. After a while, I noticed her eyes were red from crying. Curiously, I asked her what she was looking at, but she startled, slammed the screen off, and told me to mind my own business. From that day on, She started crying during dinners when my dad was at the table. I was the only one who noticed, because my mom was always busy tending to him. And when my mom served us food from my dad's plate, my sister immediately pushed it away and refused to eat. On top of that, she always protested whenever I suggested going into my parents' room to hang out. I thought my sister was just being a rebellious teenager lately. One morning, my mom announced a big piece of news with a bright smile. Today was my parents' 15th wedding anniversary. She had been unusually happy since the morning. She prepared nice clothes for everyone and spent the entire day cooking. By evening, the dinner table was filled with delicious food. My mom wore a beautiful red dress, and my dad was pushed out by my mom to sit at the head of the table. He was wearing a suit, sunglasses, and a scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. I was so excited for the feast to start, but my sister just kept her head down. I asked her what was wrong, but she just shook her head and burst into tears. My mom looked at her, and the smile on her face faded slightly. She said in a soft voice that today was a happy day for them, so she shouldn't make her dad sad. Just as our family sat down at the table, there was a sudden, violent pounding on the front door. Then, a voice called out, identifying themselves as the police and demanding that we open up. My mom startled and immediately rushed over to hug my dad tightly. The banging on the door grew louder and louder. I said I would go open it, but my mom instantly yelled at me to sit still. Then, the front door was kicked open. A crowd of police officers flooded inside. They walked up, handcuffed my mom, and started leading her away. I rushed over to hold on to her, but an officer picked me up. I yelled at my sister, telling her not to let them take our mom, but she just wailed loudly. I screamed helplessly, begging them not to take my mom away. I told them to look at my dad, pointing out that he was staring right at them and would be so sad if my mom was arrested. My sister and I were carried out to the police cruisers. I couldn't stop crying and screaming for my mom. My sister hugged me tightly, crying alongside me, and kept telling me that everything was going to be okay. A few moments later, I saw them wheeling my dad out too. I panicked and banged my hands against the car window because my mom had always told us that dad wasn't allowed outside, and especially that no one should ever see him. That night was the last time we ever saw our dad. We were never allowed to go back to that house again. After everything that happened, my sister and I were placed into a state foster care system. It took a long time before my sister finally told me the truth. My dad wasn't sick like my mom kept saying. He had actually died nearly 2 years prior. For all that time, my sister and I had been living with a corpse and our mom's lies. She explained that my mom couldn't accept that my dad was gone, so she convinced herself that he was still alive. At first, my sister believed it just like I did, but as she grew older, she started noticing the anomalies. By the time my mom announced she was hosting their wedding anniversary, my sister couldn't take it anymore. She had been living in absolute terror ever since she realized it was my dad's corpse. So she secretly called the police. My mom's love had twisted into a sick nightmare. More than 20 years have passed, and my sister and I have built our own separate lives now. Yet the psychological scar of that patient father sitting at the head of the dinner table every night remains a cold, dark shadow permanently burned into our minds until the end of our days.
My name is Melvin. Back in college, I was very close friends with a guy named Ted. One day Ted bragged to me that he had met a girl online, and after that, he talked about her every single day. Her name was Gail, and she lived about a 6-hour drive away from us. Surprisingly, after talking on the phone for just a few months, Ted claimed he was deeply in love. He even planned to take a semester off from school just to move out there and pursue the relationship. At the time, I thought Ted was pretty cool for doing something so bold. He told me he had found a job in Gail's town and asked if I could help him move since my car could hold a lot of stuff. I had a long holiday weekend coming up, so I thought, why not? A road trip sounded like a lot of fun. I figured I would drive Ted out there as a parting gift, and on my way back, I planned to stop by Yellowstone. The drive went smoothly. After we arrived, Ted told me that his new landlord had pushed back his move-in time until the next morning, so we found a local motel to stay at for the night. Ted couldn't wait another minute, so he went out to meet the girl that very afternoon. I decided to head out and check out the town's peaceful scenery. Late that night, Ted came back to the motel looking completely devastated. He told me he had seen her out with another man, and he was convinced they were in a romantic relationship. The discovery had completely crushed him. I tried to comfort him and suggested that he just treat this trip as a short vacation. After that, he could choose whether he wanted to stay or head back home. After all, his belongings were still packed in my car, and I was more than willing to help him haul them back. Ted said he needed some time to think. He even locked himself in the bathroom and started crying loudly. He barely slept at all that night. I was way too tired to keep giving him advice, so I eventually just let things quiet down on their own. The next morning, when I woke up to pack and head back, I discovered he was gone. I called his phone repeatedly, but I couldn't get through. After searching around the small town for several hours, I started to get really worried. Around noon, just as I was thinking about calling the police, Ted suddenly showed up. But he was a complete mess, and he was in a state of sheer panic. At first, he refused to answer any of my questions and just demanded that we leave town immediately. When I pushed him to tell me what had happened, Ted lost his temper. He screamed that he had gone to find Gail again to clear things up. But things got worse because he caught her kissing that other guy right in front of him. When he confronted her, she casually denied their entire relationship and all the promises she had made him, even treating him like he was a total psycho. Ted looked absolutely terrible right then. I assumed he was just deeply heartbroken and hurt by her betrayal, so I stopped questioning him. With that, we hit the road to head back home. The entire drive back, Ted wouldn't stop muttering to himself about love, betrayal, and revenge. His dark mood started to wear me down and make me exhausted. About an hour into the drive, a state trooper vehicle suddenly appeared behind us with its lights flashing, signaling me to pull over. I assumed it was just a routine traffic stop until several more police cruisers swarmed the area. The officers jumped out all at once, drew their weapons, pointed them at our car, and screamed at us to put our hands up. Before I could even process what was happening, Ted and I were dragged out of the car, slammed face down onto the pavement, handcuffed, and taken to the station in separate police cars. Inside the interrogation room, the horrific truth was uncovered, throwing me into a state of absolute shock. In reality, my friend only had a one-sided crush on this girl, Gail. She had absolutely no idea who he was, and she had never promised him anything. Those nights he claimed he was video chatting with her, he was actually just watching her vlogs and completely hallucinating a relationship that didn't exist. They had never spoken. They had never texted. He had never even left a single comment or liked any of her videos. When he arrived in town and saw Gail with her actual boyfriend, Ted flew into a completely unprovoked, jealous rage. He began stalking them, and he finally murdered both of them when he saw them happily walking out of a local hotel. Psychiatrists later diagnosed Ted with a severe case of parasocial obsession, a psychological condition where a person fabricates a one-sided, extreme attachment to content creators or people they only know online. After the trial, Ted was sent to a psychiatric facility and sentenced to prison for the lives he took. As for me, whenever I think back to that road trip, I still shudder. Our friendship ended that day, but the guilt of failing to notice the terrifying warning signs in him still haunts me. This story was inspired by a real case. Christina Grimmie was an American singer and YouTuber who rose to fame after appearing on The Voice and building a massive fan following. On the evening of June 10th, 2016, after a performance, Christina held a meet and greet and autograph session for her fans. As she embraced one of the attendees, the man suddenly pulled out a handgun and shot her at close range. The gunman was Kevin James Loibel, a 27-year-old man who had been obsessing over Christina for a long time and had convinced himself that she was his soulmate, despite the fact that they had never shared a genuine personal relationship. After being tackled by Christina's brother, Loibel took his own life at the scene. The investigation later revealed that he had planned the attack in advance, traveled to Orlando specifically to target her, and arrived armed with multiple weapons.
I could have died that day. I've always been a girl who trusted her sharp instincts. Living in a country where news about kidnappings or mass shootings appears on TV every single day, I always trained myself to be highly alert whenever I went out alone. However, there's a massive difference between book knowledge and actual survival. When a gun barrel is actually pressed into your back, your confidence is completely swallowed by pure terror. It was around 5 in the afternoon, and I was driving home from work in a relaxed mood. But that peace quickly vanished when I noticed a commercial pickup truck continuously tailing me through several intersections. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, but to shake off the growing sense of dread, I decided to pull into the parking lot of a busy Costco. I figured that staying in a crowd would be the safest option, but as soon as I stepped out of my car, I was shocked to see that same pickup truck finding a parking spot nearby. The driver got out, and I felt a shiver run down my spine just looking at his aggressive, rough appearance. He didn't even try to hide his gaze. He stared directly at me. My blood ran cold, and I immediately lowered my head, walking as fast as I could toward the main entrance of the wholesale store. I couldn't believe such a terrifying coincidence was actually happening to me. Suddenly, my thoughts were cut short by a gravelly male voice right next to my ear. The man hissed through his teeth, accusing me of stalking him and sending secret signals to other people to come and kidnap him. I froze for a few seconds, completely unable to understand what he was talking about. Just as I was about to scream and bolt, he grabbed me and unexpectedly shoved a cold, hard object right into my back. It was a handgun. My body stiffened and my throat locked up. He used his jacket to hide the gun, forcing me to stand perfectly still so it looked like we were just two normal people having a casual conversation. All around us, the parking lot was packed with customers walking in and out. People passed by very close to us, but no one noticed anything wrong. I looked at them, trying to beg for help with my eyes, but everyone just kept walking. In that exact moment, I truly understood that I could be dragged away, kidnapped, or shot dead in broad daylight. Just when it felt like all hope was gone, I spotted an older security guard standing near the entrance, watching us with a suspicious look in his eyes. Knowing this was my only shot, I took a massive gamble. I forced down my terror, pasted on a smile, and suddenly yelled out, "Sir, I've been looking for you this whole time." Taking advantage of the split second the driver froze in surprise, I used every ounce of strength in my body to sprint toward the entrance. As I flew past the security guard, I managed to shout I needed help before running straight into the main lobby. But I never expected that lunatic to chase me right inside the store. By this point, he wasn't even trying to hide his weapon anymore. The security guard immediately stepped in, shouting at the man to stop, and bravely blocked his path to keep him from getting any further inside. A brief, terrifying standoff happened right at the front doors. The paranoid gunman didn't hesitate for a single second. He pulled the trigger and fired multiple rounds right into the security guard. Shell casings rattled loudly as they hit the floor.
The security guard took several bullets to the chest. He staggered back for a moment and then collapsed into a pool of blood. But the most horrific part, the memory that will haunt me for the rest of my life, was what happened next. Even though the poor man was already lying completely motionless, that monster coldly walked up closer, pointed his gun straight down, and fired one final execution shot. The poor man's body jolted violently from the impact, and then he went completely still. Hysterical screams erupted everywhere, and a chaotic crowd of shoppers trampled over each other to escape. The thick, acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. Fortunately, the police rushed the scene incredibly fast. They fired warning shots, lunged at the gunman, and tackled him to the ground right then and there. As they handcuffed him and pinned him to the floor, the man screamed maniacally. "I was just defending myself. He was trying to kill me. All of you are plotting against me." His eyes rolled wildly, looking completely crazed. As they marched him out to a patrol car, he was laughing and crying at the same time, rambling nonsense under his breath. When I had to testify in court as a witness, I sat on the stand and retold everything I had seen with my own eyes. Sitting at the defense table, the man continuously interrupted the trial. He pointed his finger at my face and screamed at the jury that I was the mastermind who had framed him and set the whole thing up. The look in his eyes was a mix of intense rage and paranoia. Because of his severe schizophrenia and complete lack of control over his actions, he was sent to a high-security forensic psychiatric facility for mandatory treatment. Justice was technically served, but a peaceful life never returned for me. Every single night, I am jolted awake by nightmares, where I see the guard's pool of blood and the killer's manic eyes in the courtroom. This story is inspired by a real-life tragedy that took place at a Costco wholesale store in Strongsville. Around 5:40 p.m., a suspect named Bryant drove a commercial truck into the parking lot. Armed with the Springfield XD-40 handgun and a 50-round drum magazine, he headed toward the main entrance. Randolph Corrigan, a 61-year-old security guard, was taking a break near his vehicle. Seeing Bryant acting aggressively and dangerously, Corrigan followed him and tried to stop him from entering the store. Bryant shot Corrigan multiple times, causing him to fall, and then walked closer to fire a final shot. Police arrested Bryant on the spot, recovering 13 shell casings and the loaded firearm. Sadly, Corrigan passed away from his injuries, while Bryant maintained that he acted purely in self-defense. I was committed to a mental hospital by my family. I am Banning. When I was 15 years old, my life was hijacked by a lie wrapped in the appearance of concern. Before I was pushed through those hospital gates, I was a kid who was used to being tossed around. After my parents divorced, stability became a luxury I couldn't afford. My father left, and my mother collapsed both physically and mentally. By age 11, I had to learn to be the man of the house. I had to take care of myself and my mother, who was exhausted from a painful case of shingles. When I moved to Dallas to live with my father and stepmother, I hoped it would be a fresh start, a real home. But I soon realized it wasn't a place to settle down. It was just a change in who was controlling my life. Strict discipline and constant fighting taught me a heartbreaking lesson. I wasn't loved. I was only there because they allowed it, and that favor could be taken away at any time. I rebelled like any abandoned child would. I let my hair grow long, wore torn clothes, and listened to punk rock to drown out the screaming in my heart. The adults looked at me and saw nothing but trouble. They talked about my future in secret phone calls. They set all kinds of standards to judge me, but no one ever looked me in the eye and asked, "How are you feeling?" One day, they sat me down. They told me I needed to go to the hospital for a quick health check, just for 2 weeks. I had no choice. I had no voice in that house. I walked into the residential ward with a naive hope. I thought that after 14 days, everything would be better. But 2 weeks turned into 3, then 4. The bitter truth finally came out when the psychiatrist called me into his office. He looked at me through thick glasses. His eyes were cold and distant, like he was looking at a lab specimen rather than a human being. "Your family feels you are severely depressed and cannot fit in. We are moving you to a long-term residential facility for teens," he said in a flat voice. In that moment, I felt like I was falling into a bottomless pit. I realized I wasn't sent there to get healthy. I was being abandoned. They just needed a legal way to dump me while the insurance money was still good. It was a silent disposal under the name of medical treatment. The new facility had long, cold hallways. It was so quiet that I could hear my own heart racing. My first impression of where I really was came from the sight of a girl. She was chained to a bed in the corner of a room, her eyes completely blank. I wanted to scream, but my throat was so dry that no sound came out. In this place, the most basic human rights were gone. The rules were simple but cruel. No touching anyone, no private conversations, and absolutely zero privacy. The worst part was a punishment called the chair. The first time I was punished was because I forgot to close my bedroom door. They made me sit on a stone chair in the hallway. My hands had to be on my thighs, my feet flat on the floor, and my back perfectly straight. I had to stare at the wall for 30 minutes without glancing at anyone. But that was just the beginning. I resisted, and the punishment grew into indefinite chair time. Anytime there wasn't a mandatory activity, I was stuck to that chair. Eventually, I was thrown into a private room for permanent chair status. During that summer, while other kids were running around outside, I had to sit facing a white wall for 10 to 12 hours a day. I had to eat my meals on that chair in total silence. Because I had to face the wall, I couldn't see what was happening around me, but my hearing became painfully sharp. The sounds were scarier than any image because they triggered my imagination. I heard a steady thumping, the sound of someone banging their head against a wooden bed frame until they bled. I heard piercing screams that tore through the silence of the night. I heard kids my age tearing out their own hair, gouging at their eyes, or clawing their own skin in desperation. To survive, I learned a skill that I later found out is called dissociation. It was like a switch in my brain. I would disconnect from reality. I would separate myself from my aching body on the chair and float somewhere near the ceiling. The only joy that connected me to life was through a small gap near my chair. If I leaned back just a little, the blurry screen would vanish, and I could see a tree through a window. I learned to sway gently, watching every leaf change color. That tree was my only friend. It didn't judge me or force me to sit still. It represented everything I craved: freedom and life. After a few months, I realized this place worked like a money-making machine. They didn't keep you because you were sick. They kept you as long as your insurance kept paying. I decided I had to become a master actor. I started observing what the doctors wanted to hear. I figured out which behaviors they called progress. I played the part of a tame child. I said fake apologies and smiled at the right times. After nearly 9 months, when the insurance stopped paying, I was moved to a halfway house in Dallas. The first time I left the hospital to go to a bowling alley, I broke down. The real world had too much noise, too much light, and too much chaotic conversation. I felt broken from the inside out. The me that existed then was in worse shape than the kid who first entered the hospital. But it was at the halfway house, where hurting people cooked, cleaned, and took responsibility for their lives together, that I found light. We used to sneak into the cemetery across the street to watch outdoor movies. There was a strange comfort in sitting among the dead to feel that I was still alive. I realized something important. Hurting people often find each other. We aren't separate. Broken pieces meant to be thrown away. We all come from the same large piece of humanity. When we share our pain, those wounds are no longer just scars. They are the threads that sew us back together. Years later, after 2 suicide attempts at the age of 39, I found true salvation at Yosemite National Park. In the greatness of nature, my own pain felt small and insignificant. I became a backpacking guide, helping others face their trauma in the middle of old forests and stone mountains. My wounds are still there, but now they are the stitches that connect me to this world. This story is based on the life of Banning Lyon, who was placed in the Charter Real Private Mental Hospital in Dallas in the 1980s when he was only 15. It was later discovered that the hospital intentionally held teenagers until their insurance ran out while using inhumane punishments. His memoir, The Chair in the Valley, 2024, is a powerful look at the abuse in the mental health care system and the healing power of nature.
My name is Grace, and I am 45 years old. I'm a stay-at-home mom with a daughter in high school. 2 months ago, I finally signed the divorce papers, ending a marriage that lasted nearly 20 years. To an outsider, it might look like I'm throwing away a stable family, but they don't know the truth. I wasn't just leaving a husband. I was escaping a monster who spent 2 decades pretending to be a devoted partner. My story actually begins over 20 years ago. Back then, I lived with my parents. My dad was a taxi driver, and my mother worked at a local grocery store. We were a very happy, close-knit family. Everything changed in a single night. That evening, I was working late at the office. Around 8 p.m., my phone started ringing off the hook. It was my mother. When I finally picked up, her voice was frantic and broken. I knew instantly that something terrible had happened. I rushed out of the office as fast as I could. When I got home, I was hit with the news that shattered my world. My father had been killed in a car accident while driving his taxi. My mother and I were completely destroyed by the shock. After the funeral, the house felt empty and suffocating. I tried to keep going to work, but I felt hollow inside. About 3 days later, I met the man who would eventually become my husband. After work one day, I stopped by a quiet coffee shop I liked. I just wanted to be alone with my thoughts, but he came up and started a conversation. Over the next few weeks, I kept running into him at that same shop. Because I was still grieving the loss of my father, his kindness and attention made it easy for me to open up. He was a great listener and was always there when I needed someone to talk to. What gave me even more of a connection to him was that he was also a taxi driver. Eventually, he began to pursue me. It wasn't easy for him because I wasn't ready for any big changes in my life at the time, but he was incredibly patient. After almost 2 years of knowing each other, we got married. Back then, I truly believed I had found the one. Our marriage lasted 18 years. I stayed home to take care of the house and raise our daughter while he went to work. We didn't have many big fights, and while we weren't incredibly close, we had a stable life. Everything changed in March 2024. While I was cleaning out the back of my husband's closet, I accidentally found an old wallet tucked away in a corner. I recognized it immediately. It was the wallet I had bought for my father with my very first paycheck. After my father's accident, that wallet had gone missing. I opened it up. Inside was a photo of me when I was 20 years old. I immediately called my mother to ask if she had given it to him, but she insisted she had never seen it since the accident. She was just as shocked as I was that it was in our house. I decided not to confront my husband right away. That night, while he was fast asleep, I crept out of bed and checked his phone. I found a message thread with an old coworker of his. One sentence jumped out at me. "You finally married the woman you always wanted." I sat there frozen for a long time, staring at the man lying next to me. A deep sense of suspicion began to grow. The next morning, I called that coworker. I lied and told him I already knew everything to pressure him into telling the truth. After hesitating for a while, he finally started talking. Before he ever met me, my husband and my father worked for the same taxi company. My father used to show off the wallet with my photo to his coworkers. My husband saw that photo and became obsessed with me. He tried to get close to me back then, but my father found out and blocked him. My father didn't trust him and thought he was a bad person. Because of this, a major grudge formed between them. Since they worked at the same company, they actually shared the same taxi and split driving shifts. During the shift right before my father's fatal accident, my husband had intentionally sabotaged the car's tires. The car failed while my father was on the road, leading to the high-speed crash that killed him. After hearing this, I lost all control. That night, I confronted my husband. I held up the wallet and repeated everything I had learned. At first, he tried to deny it, but then he broke down and confessed. He insisted he never meant to kill my father. He just wanted to get back at him and didn't realize the crash would be that bad. I didn't care if he didn't mean to or didn't realize. The fact was that my father was dead, and it started with his hand. His explanations meant nothing to me. I wanted to go to the police, but the accident happened so long ago. I had no physical evidence other than a confession and a story from a coworker. I knew the chances of a legal conviction were very low. I decided to get a divorce. The choice wasn't hard, but it felt incredibly heavy. I didn't see him as a husband anymore. I saw him as a 20-year mistake. I moved out with my daughter and cut off all contact with him. But the feeling of being unsafe never truly went away. Last week, nearly 2 years after the divorce, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a copy of that same photo of me from when I was 20. On the back, someone had written, "I will always find a way to have you." I sat in silence for a long time after reading it. I didn't feel the rage I felt before. Instead, I felt a very clear, cold fear. I realized that this story isn't actually over yet. My name is Brenna. My life is split into 2 distinct chapters, before I knew the truth and after. My family fell apart early on. My mother died when I was only 8 years old after a fatal fall down the stairs. After she passed, my father completely collapsed. At the funeral, he cried so hard he couldn't even stand. He kept repeating over and over that he wanted to die just to be with her. But for my sake, he pulled himself together. He became quieter and more withdrawn, but he still worked hard to provide the best life possible for me. Thanks to my mother's life insurance payout, we moved into a beautiful new house that was modern and clean. My father didn't sell the old house, though. He kept it exactly as it was and went back frequently to clean. He said he wanted to keep everything just the way it was when Mom was alive. My mother's ashes were buried under a massive oak tree in the backyard of that old house. Every time we went back, I would see my father standing silently for hours under the shade of that tree. Sometimes he would mumble to himself, as if he were having a conversation with her. I would watch him from a distance, feeling a deep sense of guilt that I didn't quite understand. Today is finally my 18th birthday. It is a milestone I have been waiting for a very long time. I still remember my mother's final moments vividly. She lay in the ICU for 2 days in a deep coma. There was only one brief moment, when I was the only one in the room, that she suddenly opened her eyes. She gripped my hand tight and whispered weakly, "Vanity, drawer." secret. As soon as she finished the sentence, she left me forever. I did nothing but scream and cry. My father rushed in looking devastated and pulled me into his arms. After the funeral, while my father was busy handling the arrangements, I snuck into my parents' bedroom. I opened the drawer of the vanity and found a small, locked box. The key was hidden perfectly under an old notebook. Because my mother had said the word secret, I didn't tell anyone. I opened the box alone. Inside was a handwritten letter and an old voice recorder. At 8 years old, I wasn't mature enough to fully grasp everything, but what I read and heard was enough to drown my entire childhood in terror. I only opened it that one time, then I hid the box away very carefully. I chose to stay silent and continued living as if nothing had ever happened. People thought I became quiet because I lost my mother. In reality, I was carrying a secret far too heavy for a child. Today, now that I am 18, I took the box out again. My hands shook as I held the letter. This wasn't the innocent curiosity of an 8-year-old anymore. It was the suffocating weight and pressure of an adult. My mother wrote that my father was looking for a way to kill her. She wrote that if anything bad happened to her, I had to take this evidence to the police. I burst into tears and had to stop for a long time to regain my composure. Then, I pressed play on the recorder. My mother's panicked crying came through first, mixed with the sound of violent crashing and heavy rushing footsteps. Then my father's voice came on, cold and demanding. "Sign it. You said you loved me and the kid. Now prove it." My mother's pleading and his cold laughter were captured perfectly on the tape. He was forcing her to sign the life insurance papers. It was very likely that her accidental fall down the stairs wasn't an accident at all. It was a carefully staged murder to get the insurance money. In that moment, I wasn't afraid anymore. I just felt a sense of disgust and horror so strong I wanted to throw up. I had stayed silent for 10 years because I was only 8. If my father had been arrested then, I would have lost everything. No mother, no father, and a life in the foster care system. The fear of being abandoned made me bury the secret deep. I grew up in a home that looked normal on the outside, but was actually a prison built on lies. I still stood next to my father under that oak tree where my mother rests, watching him mourn his wife, never knowing what was actually going through his head. Every time we were there, a chill ran down my spine. But today, everything is different. I am sitting in the police station with the box sitting right in front of me. For the first time in 10 years, I feel truly free. The nightmare that haunted my childhood is finally coming to an end.